Welcome back. Today we begin a series of talks on the topic of consciousness. Now, consciousness is a very controversial topic, especially when we make claims such as the human brain creates consciousness, and somehow we should be able to identify those brain circuits that create conscious experience in the human mind. The entire topic is really a minefield of misconceptions, misunderstanding, preconceived notion, and of course the idea that we are all experts in consciousness because we are conscious and we know our consciousness, our conscious content. We are totally experienced in it. In fact, it's the thing that we know best. So we are very reluctant to have anybody tell us what can happen in consciousness and how it might work. In addition to our own personal resentments about people talking to us about our consciousness, there is an entire 2,000-year history of difficulty, both philosophical, religious, and scientific, that can easily torpedo any attempt to introduce a reasonable, rational discussion on mindfulness. So what I thought we'd do is just do a little bit of a survey of the field in which we will operate and how we got here, and of course introduce our own kind of bias and conviction as to what the science of mindfulness really should accomplish in the end. Now, I want to introduce you to a book written by Stephen Greenblatt, who is a professor of humanities at Harvard. He wrote this wonderful book called The Swerve. And in this book, he details the discovery of a manuscript of a text written around 50 BC in the Roman Empire. This manuscript was known to exist because other authors, from Cicero and other famous writers in the antiquity, had made reference to this text and quoted on occasion from it. However, the original manuscript was not available. To just tell you briefly how this happened is this author, Poggio Bracciolini, was a clerk, a secretary in the papacy in Rome in around 1400 or so. So just at the beginning of the Renaissance. He ran into all kinds of political problems at the papal court, eventually kind of got disgusted and dedicated himself to his original hobby, which was to find ancient manuscripts. Many educated people in those days were very interested in the Latin-speaking antiquity. Authors such as Cicero, in this case Lucretius, and many others, whose Latin was admired and often formed an inspiration for other texts. Latin at that time was the lingua franca, it was the language, as English is now, which was spoken throughout the civilized world, and both scientific and other texts were published always in Latin first, and if translated only rarely into a more common language. So in 1417, Poggio arrived at a monastery in Fulda, Germany, and he pulled a manuscript from the shelf, and it was entitled De Rerum Naturae, which means in English, about the nature of things, basically about the nature of the world and what makes it tick. And he knew immediately from his extensive knowledge of Latin literature, that this was the original transcribed, handwritten, of course, before the Gutenberg printing press was invented. This was the original text that everybody had been looking for. This is a huge poem, many thousands of lines long, inspired by the Epicurean philosophy. Epicurus was a philosopher in ancient Greece who also adopted ideas from Democritus, who invented the idea of the atom. Atom in Greek means something that cannot be divided. So atomic physics derives its name from this old idea that if you cut a material into smaller and smaller pieces, you eventually arrive at something that cannot be divided anymore. And it's kind of the substrate, the core of material and existence. So this is what this book, De Rerum Naturae, talks about. The stuff of the universe, Lucretius proposed, is an infinite number of atoms, running randomly through space, like dust motes in a sunbeam, colliding, hooking together in a ceaseless process of creation and destruction.